Matty Loves Podcast. Matty Loves Podcast.
Well, thanks for joining us. It's episode 15 here in October. It's Halloween month here at Matty Loves Podcast. I'm your host, Matt D. Simone. Joined with me, always, Dr. Tom Lucas. How you doing, Dr. Tom?
I am doing well. Doctor in quotes, the street shaman of nerdery and geekdom. I throw 20-sided dice like a shaman throws the bones. I totally threw you off with that.
You did.
Right?
You did. Because
I'm going to keep working this street shaman doctor thing. Would you wait? It's going to get better with every episode.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
I'm sitting here trying to visualize it. Anyway, so yes, I'm joined as always by the street shaman, Dr. Tom Lucas. Also, much like the last episode, I'm also joined by actual Dr. Josh Begley. Sir, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
It's
very good.
This is our third episode with you, Dr. J, and it's been very special. It's been great having you on the show.
Well, thank you. I love being here. You got the trifecta, the hat trick.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Right?
Yeah, the Three Timers Club. You're
Look out. We'll name a sandwich
you're
after
in
you.
there. And a Two Timers Club member here is Sydney Williams, who was with us for episode 14 as we discussed some of his works and novels and whatnot, and also spoke a little of what we were currently reading and as far as things that were a little bit related to Halloween and whatnot. Sydney, how have you been doing over the past week?
I'm doing great. Great to be back with you gentlemen. And I was thinking about Josh is a true doctor of horror, if you really think about it. Because his thesis or dissertation is on a horror topic.
What was your dissertation?
Well, my dissertation was taking the anthropological theory of play and applying it to fantasy, science fiction, and horror, an attempt to kind of give a new critical lens to look at these genres and understand them, and then as kind of a springboard to that, use that as a springboard to talk about why we adapt certain franchises into extra-textual media, such as tabletop role-playing games, video games, going to conventions and cosplaying and stuff like that, because that's a big thing, and it's becoming bigger and bigger, and it has its roots in play, basically.
What were some of the works that you referenced in sort of building that thesis?
Are we talking theoretical or
like
primary?
actual physical stuff that's out there that people have played or are playing?
Properties.
Yeah.
Properties, yeah.
That one I talked mostly about Dungeons and Dragons because it's the granddaddy of them all.
Right.
Is it true that originally it was written to be Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings? What I understood is that they wanted to play basically in Middle Earth, but when they approached the Tolkien estate, they were told no. Mm-hmm. And so they genericized fantasy, and actually that was really huge for the genre because it opened it up beyond Tolkien.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I mean, D&D has its roots certainly in Tolkien, also in Robert E. Howard and Conan.
I was going to say there's a real Conan feel to it.
Yeah. And Fritz Lieber's Fafhrd and the Grey Mountain.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's good stuff.
And I chose this topic because I was like, it fascinates me for one thing, and also I knew I'm going to stick with this for 5 years or longer. Mm-hmm. So I better like what I'm reading and doing.
Right.
And so I got all the back issues of Dragon magazine. And
really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I got it on.
I only have one issue of Dragon magazine from back in the day. It's got a Tom Wham game in it. Search for the Emperor's Treasure, which is the Tom Wham games. Were always the Dragon magazine.
Yeah, what was Dragon magazine?
Dragon magazine is the magazine for Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, okay.
And so it always contained supplemental material and adventures and other things, but occasionally an issue would have a game.
Yeah.
That it would be printed on cardstock. You pull it out of the magazine, cut out the pieces, and play. And there's a guy by the name of Tom Wham who made some of the most fun, little micro games that were in the center of Dragon magazine. A couple of which I have nice reprints through Steve Jackson Games. I have Snit's Revenge.
Oh, okay.
And Attack of the Awful Green Things, which is an aliens invading a spaceship. We'll play, Matt.
Okay.
I will bring these games over and
All
we'll
right.
totally play.
All right.
And he did a micro RPG called Search for the Emperor's Treasure, which basically you move around the map and you go into little dungeons. All these things you can see like today, like in Munchkin, for example, and other things. But yeah, Dragon Magazine was like the magazine, and it got thinner as the years went on. But man, the first 8 years or so, Dragon Magazine, priceless.
Oh, it was, and it would have so many things. Like you were mentioning Tolkien, like there in some of the early issues, like even in issue 1, they had advertisements for modules. And for those of you who haven't played tabletop role playing games, modules are basically kind of story guides. It's almost like a script that the DM uses.
It's a guideline, basically.
Guideline. And so they had one like play the Battle of the Five Armies, and they weren't even trying to hide it.
Right. No, one of the great things about especially the early days of Dungeons and Dragons and gaming, I'd say that first 10 years or so, is that there's so much content that was fan created.
Yes.
And there was really a spirit of creativity in the sense that it was highly encouraged for you to go past the pages of the game books, create your own stuff.
Yeah.
And Dragon was a magazine where fans could get their homemade stuff, their house-made stuff, published and shared, with the whole gaming community.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. The collaborative aspect of role-playing games, and especially in the early days, when it was first becoming a thing, it's pretty special. Pretty special.
It talking about the magazine, it takes you back, and you remember how we communicated before the internet was opened up.
Yes.
And it's amazing, how much communication there was when there was not the highway that we have now, and there still was a lot of fan interaction and a lot of interconnectivity.
Whenever I have a few relics, not like Simone, who we will have on the show eventually, who has this incredibly expansive collection of old game stuff and games and books and all that. You stand in front of the shelves he has at his house, and it is an archive of so much stuff. It's from the original Dungeons and Dragons rules to all these games and all that. And damn it, he lives too far away to drive down the street, knock on his door, and say, "No, damn it, we're playing these games."
I know.
They just sit on the shelf. But Will Wheaton did a really nice blog post a few weeks ago where he talked about the joy of reading game books just to read them.
Yeah.
You can sit down with the Monster Manual and read it.
Yeah.
And it's enjoyable.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is.
And
Lord, you could look at deities and demigods and actually learn about the Greek.
You really can. You really can. And what a phenomenal thing to leverage your dissertation into. Yeah. Very smart.
Yeah.
And also, what a great thing to be an expert on.
I know, right?
I
don't know how hireable that makes me outside of Full Sail, but luckily I like my job.
What I understand about the PhD thing is that you become an expert, a niche expert.
Yes.
Your goal is to, if you've chosen wisely, to be one of the few people on the planet who can speak to the subject with such great detail and, for as long as it takes. Yeah. Which, if anyone is looking for the expert, boom, there you are. Simone, who will be on our show, is, I believe his dissertation was on generation ships, which is that genre of sci-fi where we travel somewhere far, far away, and as such, we have to live several generations out on a massive ship.
Like Gene Wolfe's Book of the Long Sun.
Yeah. And
in the old science fiction series Star Lost.
Or you may have seen Pandorum a few years ago.
Which has had a comic incarnation.
Right? Or Pandorum, which you may have seen a while ago, which is a fantastic...
Did they have Dennis Quaid in it?
It sure did.
Yeah.
It sure did. And So if you want to talk generation ships, you got to hunt down Simone, right?
Yes.
So when you're a niche specialist, the jobs don't necessarily come flying at you, but
Corporate world doesn't always have a place for that.
right.
No.
But it sure makes you an interesting guy to talk to.
Yeah.
I'd like to think so. And like I tell my students, you don't go into writing and you don't go into teaching because you want to get rich. It's because you love what you do.
Yes, absolutely.
And because you don't want to get ulcers in the corporate world.
No, God, no.
No. So moving on, man.
Yes.
Keep us on track.
So, moving on, the main topic of this week's episode is kind of discussing some things that have to do with Halloween. One, I guess, I don't know if you would call it a subgenre of horror and suspense that you can find, I guess, exclusively on the internet, would be called CREEPYPASTA. And CREEPYPASTA is something we mentioned a couple episodes back. But now that we have Sid here, I was wondering, Sid, if you could maybe give the listeners a better explanation of what exactly CREEPYPASTA is, maybe like how it really kind of started to come about and whatnot.
Well, my thumbnail of it would be that it's kind of fabricated or fabulous urban legend. It's tales that are reproduced and shared on the internet in the vein of those urban legends that really have roots in medieval times. The story of the choking Doberman is a famous one. That floated around, predates CREEPYPASTA, but people come home, they find their Doberman passed out, they take him to the vet, and the vet says, well, let me keep him here, we'll figure out what's wrong with him. Then when they get home, there's a phone call, and the vet's going, go next door, don't stay in your house. And we discover that the Doberman, as he examined the Doberman, he found like a burglar's fingers lodged in his throat. And indeed, the police come and they find this dangerous intruder passed out in a cabinet because he was hiding from the Doberman. And everybody.
And that's an old medieval tale, Viking tale.
Yeah,
of
they
warring.
all harken back to medieval times. Yeah.
You know what that reminds me of real quick? There was this series of books, like when I was a kid, called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And there's so much
same vein.
I remember that book.
I think same vein.
And CREEPYPASTA is a collaborative, communal thing, and it's mostly amateur writing.
Amateur horror writing in the vein of an urban legend, but it is made up. But because it's on the internet,
Yes.
it has the weight of seriousness and the seeming realness to it that we might pick a book off the shelf and say, well, this is a collection of horror stories that people made up. We read CREEPYPASTA, and it's like reading one of those parody sites where am I reading real news or am I reading something like The Onion?
And there's rules for writing, contributing to CREEPYPASTA. One of them is that you can never even suggest that it is fiction.
Yeah.
You have to totally write it as if you are sharing factual information, with the reading audience.
And there is a seeming realness to it. And, there are even like YouTube versions now. I mean, I associate it a lot with Reddit, but, it has many strands out there. And you encounter these pieces, and because they have that weight of realness, there's a real eeriness as you read them all the time. And
Sure.
One of my favorite when I was looking it up here is the expressionless patient. Reportedly, June 1972, a case of this strange woman who turns up in the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and she does not have normal expressions, and they start to think, well, maybe she's not human. And you read it in that context, and you start going, ooh. And it has the effect on you that stories your aunts and uncles that heard all of these rumors recounted and they were scary to you when you were a kid, and it kind of takes you back to that place.
Now, Slenderman came from Creepypasta, the Slenderman character and all that. And one of the things that when I started seeing the Slenderman stuff show up is that in the back of my mind, it felt like all the Boogeyman stories that I had heard when I was a kid, and I felt like Slenderman was a character that was much older than actuality, which is, a couple years ago, Slenderman is invented by whoever it was.
Oh,
but
right.
Slenderman feels like something that's been with us for
Forever.
a long time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Where have I seen this before? I know I've seen this before, but the fact is I haven't.
Yeah.
It's a relatively new thing. How amazing is that?
Yeah, no kidding. That you could do that, and not only do that, but create something like that, and then have so many, like you were saying, the communal aspect of Creepypasta, have so many people add to the story to where you're like, oh wow, this is something that people have been talking about forever, and really, it hadn't been the case.
It really kind of goes back, speaking of, we were talking about pre-internet communication, I mean, it goes back to like the spirit of the troubadours, where, you would have these traveling minstrels that would sing these story songs, and different people would pick up the song and add a verse,
right?
Add a variation. If you go back and look at folk songs, there's so many variations of them because so many performers have picked them up and added their own spin to them.
Sure.
And am I right in saying that there's an anonymity aspect to Creepypasta too, where you basically post anonymously or using a handle, like they totally remove the writer from the story.
Right, yeah.
So you can't be like big on Creepypasta.
It kind of sheds the whole notion of copyright and author branding and all that, and it really is about the stories.
Yeah.
And again, and with copyrights and everything, a lot of the and a lot of the fervor for copyrights today, we've lost a lot of that communal nature of storytelling,
Right.
and so
a lot of people want credit,
right?
I understand. Don't steal my stuff.
Well, and as a writer, I want you to read something of mine and go, "Oh, he wrote that. I want to check out more of his stuff." But Creepypasta, you have to leave all that at the door and say, "I'm going to contribute to your nightmares tonight," and you're not going to know who it came from.
And I think there's room for that. Clearly, there's room for it. There, it has been very popular, but I think there's a nice place for that. Where the credit is dropped, and it is all about the story and the seeming realness of it and the eeriness. Stephen King talks about 3 levels of terror or horror in Danse Macabre. The base level is kind of the jump scare, the head rolling down the stairs, he puts it. The next level he calls the horror is where we start to see supernatural incursions into the everyday world,
right,
where we see giant monsters or whatever. But then he says there's the level, the terror, where it's like that breath on the back of your neck and you turn around and there's nothing there. Or you come home and something doesn't seem right about your house, and you realize somebody sneaked in here and replaced everything with an exact duplicate.
That's a Far Side, isn't it?
Well, it's also like
Stephen Wright uses that line.
Oh, that's
And Freud, when he talks about the uncanny, the unheimlich, if you would be in German.
Exactly, and I think Creepypasta gets into that realm a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Now you had said something about it leaking over to YouTube and finding its way. Slenderman has become a game, which I have not played, but I know it's a game. And
it's in Marble Hornets, the web series.
And flip. Matt, tell us about.
Well, that's what I was gonna. That honestly, when I first heard of Creepypasta, that's the first thing that I was directed to. Was my, I didn't really look up. I wasn't really. I hadn't really heard of it until not that long ago. So I looked into Marble Hornets and what Marble Hornets, is what it was all about. And, for me, I mean, That's the most terrifying thing I've seen in a long time.
It gets to the terror level.
Yeah. And I don't, and it's kind of like one of those things, like for me, my ultimate terror for me and thinking about like, films, things that they do is, I don't like the you're walking down the street and, you hear something behind you and you look behind you and you see like a shadowy figure trailing you about maybe 50 feet. And you turn back forward and you keep walking, and then you turn around to look, see if they're there, and they're gone. And then you turn and you look, and they're right in front of you. Like that kind of stuff. Like I got like there's a lot of that with the Slenderman or the Marble Hornet stuff, and that the whole thing about Marble Hornets that surprised me was I'm not really a found footage type of guy. Tom spoke about it. I kind of view found footage material similarly to Tom, but
what episode was that where? I've already kind of put my platform on.
I think it was the last episode.
Was
you
it?
mentioned something about it, maybe. Or it might have been just when we were talking before we started recording.
Okay.
But regardless, I found that they just did a really good job of the effects that they were using. My only problem was once it got about halfway into the series, there was a shift in the production value. And it got even better. Or as far as just the quality. And it didn't seem as like...
It actually worked against it.
Right, yeah, because it changed a lot about it. I liked we're just doing this without a budget, and not, getting all that YouTube money in. Now we can really do something with this, And I think as the series progressed and the more money started to come in and they were allowed to, have more funds to film more stuff and use more effects, it kind of muddied the story for me in itself, I thought.
There's a beauty in simplicity.
Sometimes
I like the moments where it's
lo-fi is what you need.
Yeah, and it's kind of almost in the peripheral vision of the viewer in the story in Marble Hornets, and that's where, to me, the greatest scares happen.
Absolutely.
How many episodes?
There's 133.
What?
Yeah, there's 133. And then they go from like 2 to like 8 minutes long.
Wow.
Not a lot of them are 8 minutes, but.
How often were they putting them out? I mean, is it a done thing now?
Yeah, it's over now.
Okay. How many... What was their, release schedule like?
I've read about that somewhere, and I'm pretty sure it was something that they would bring up maybe once, twice a week. Now, you were talking about Reddit, Sid, and I think Marble Hornets really got some steam on Reddit, and that's where it really started to pick up as far as the fan base goes. And like a lot of the web series on YouTube, no matter what genre it's associated in, it always starts out hot, and you see 14 million views, and by the time you get down to the last few episodes, you're down to the 600,000s. You know what I mean? That's a lot.
Well, yeah, it ain't too shabby, but there's drop off.
Right, yeah. There's definitely a drop off.
People today don't stick with stuff till the end because there's so much to choose from. Back in the day when I would go to Blockbuster, right, and we would rent a couple movies for the night. Even if the movie stunk, I would watch it all the way through because, dag blam it, I'm getting my $5 worth.
Right.
But, when you're rocking Netflix, you're like, oh, I'll take that for a spin. 10 minutes in, you're like, nah, and then you're on to the next thing. I have so many unfinished things on Netflix.
My biggest resource on Netflix is my partially viewed film.
Right.
My list on Netflix, I never look at.
Right.
It's like, what was I watching again, and what did I watch last week? Let me get back to that.
And in today's landscape, you just jump right on to the next thing. Whatevs.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about Creepypasta. I'm glad we got to talk about that at length because that's something that's kind of been on my mind, especially here recently now that we're entering the Halloween season and everything. And I think to close about Creepypasta, I neglected to mention the fact that it's something that people go to intentionally freak themselves out. This isn't a subgenre of writing that will, you just happen to come across that just so happens to be scary at moments. It's like, this is something that you go towards, I want to freak myself out here, where can I go to scare myself? And I guess maybe that's where the whole name creepypasta comes in, because it's the internet and there's so much content, and spaghetti, all you can eat.
Something else too is it has something to do with cut and paste, the pasta part, because the idea is that you will distribute this material. You go, oh my God, this is the scariest paragraph I've ever read in my life. You guys have got to see it, and you would cut and paste and put it somewhere else too. So that's also
interesting.
The element, and also. From what I remember of the times that I've gone over to Creepypasta, is that the website is it's not the most user-friendly site in the world, which makes you feel like when you find something to read, you've kind of discovered something.
Right,
you know? And one of my favorite tropes in horror is when our protagonist or our team hits the books. They go to the creepy bookstore or they go to the library and they start discovering the truth behind whatever horror they're facing. They're looking at the microfiche and, oh my God, the whole family burned to death 50 years ago, or this or
they
that. They
find the pictures like behind other documents, like, wait, what is this?
Right. Yeah. I love the book scene. The research scene, and Creepypasta kind of makes you feel like you're
doing that the whole time.
You're going through things, and I'm making the gesture of like going through a card file, which no one can see but you guys. But the idea that you found that rare book or the page in the book or the paragraph, oh my God, kind of moment. Yeah. And I like that.
I often think that's why a lot of academics like horror. Because it is a very research.
It is research. I mean, Lovecraft is about researchers.
Oh yeah.
And compiling information.
Who
and
go
everything.
too far.
Who
learn the horrible.
They learn things that they should not have looked upon.
Yeah.
And, all of Call of Cthulhu is assembling data.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the data drives you insane.
Yeah. That's the.
And often leads to death. Like the role-playing game was so ingenious. Did you ever play the role-playing game?
I have not. I've always wanted to play Call of Cthulhu.
I believe it was a Chaosium game when it first, if I'm pronouncing that right.
I think that's right.
I think so.
Chaosium is.
It had, when you play a role-playing game, you have all your stats. Strength, intelligence, wisdom, all that. But it also had a sanity stat.
Oh, my God.
And as you would encounter various things on your adventure, you would lose sanity points, and these are a permanent deduction.
Oh, no.
Okay, so yes, you read that cursed grimoire, lose 2 sanity points, and eventually you end up insane. It's almost impossible not to play Call of Cthulhu and not end up insane. And that's when the fun really goes, because then you roll to see what kind of insanity.
Right, how crazy am I?
Right. And then you get to play it out.
Yeah.
And that's the demise of the team as it starts to unravel and the creepy crawlies start to kill people. And in a way, Prometheus, and I'm totally going like left field with this, in Prometheus, or in an Alien to an extent, but especially Prometheus, because they were trying to discover what had happened, at this alien weapons station or whatever it is. They start to die. They start to get infected. They start to lose their minds, and brilliant. That's about the only brilliant thing about that film. Otherwise, it's a glorious disaster.
Guillermo del Toro wanted to make a period appropriate adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness.
I wish he would.
And I think he felt he had trouble getting financing because of Prometheus, and it tread some of the same territory.
Well, I also thought that he wanted to do it R-rated, and the studios...
Nobody wants you to do R-rated anymore because you can't get on enough screens. And, commerce gets in the way of great art,
That's where the director's cuts and the big DVD sales come in. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how many films flopped, but then through the power of streaming, or DVDs, developed a calling. Blade Runner was a flop.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And Event Horizon, really has come into its own.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
More now even than
It's
in
so
its
good.
day. And
Call
unfortunately,
Cthulhu in space, man.
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's like footage of it that was lost.
Oh,
some
really?
Cut scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can search on the internet and you can find snippets of what
was cut?
Different scenes of madness. And also as the current crew, the Fishburne crew, starts to go mad. I think there are scenes of that were lost.
Okay.
And so
Too bad.
Interesting.
yeah.
Right.
One of my favorite examples is Big Trouble in Little China, which did terrible at the
Another
box
yeah,
office.
another one.
But
that didn't-
everybody loves that movie.
I think
As well they
since it
should.
popped up on Netflix, I've watched it 5 times.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Jack
own
Burton.
the DVD, man,
You
and I'll
do?
watch it 4 or 5 times a year.
So Kim Cattrall.
yeah,
my
I forgot.
God.
Yesterday on FX, they had a Star Trek movie marathon.
Oh,
And I had forgotten that she was in Undiscovered Country.
yeah, with the Bob.
As a
Yeah.
Right?
Vulcan,
Yes,
The
Vulcan
bad guy.
/ Romulan or
Yes.
whatever she is, and those are fun too because there's the most random people like Christian Slater.
Uh-huh.
Cameos, yeah.
Yeah.
cameos
I'm a
and
Trekkie.
things like that.
Yeah.
And Worf, Michael Dorn
He
is
plays his grandfather.
Yeah, he's a Klingon lawyer.
Yeah.
And also the guy who played the Black Vulcan in Voyager is just a random crewman.
Yeah.
And there's all these sorts of things, coming around. But yeah, something that flops, in the box office ends up having a cult following, having, Mike Judge, Beavis and Butthead, Office
Mike
Space,
Judge.
Idiocracy. Well, Office
Office
Space,
Space, yeah,
was a
yeah.
DVD hit.
Yeah.
And
It's
Idiocracy.
really a Comedy Central hit, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
probably.
right. Yeah, because they
It was on
play it
every-
like
yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
Idiocracy also, because he got completely snowballed on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that ended up, consequently, it's on HBO Go right now. So
Funny you mentioned that there's a new comic out that Rick Remender's writing called Tokyo Ghost. Have you read anything about that?
No.
What's that about?
It's drawn by Sean Murphy, who drew Chrononauts.
okay,
And it's pretty much like Idiocracy in Tokyo.
really?
Yeah,
Really?
it's like the problem that they're having with a lot of the people is they've gotten so addicted to tech, they can now walk around and they have nothing but like screens everywhere.
Okay.
Right? And they can still function and do everything, but they have all this stuff going on. And
We're already there, man.
Yeah, oh, I know.
I was watching a guy sitting in the hall this morning with Google
Glass?
Spectacles.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple people walking around town with them, but I've never had the chance to actually use them myself.
Yeah, I
So,
haven't worn them myself.
Right. So, horror, the genre of horror.
Well, what does it take to come up with this shit? That's the next. That's the next thing I wanted to ask,
To
just
put
in
it
general.
more nicely.
To close our discussion. I mean, how much horror have you guys read to the point to where at the end of it you think to yourself, what did it take to come up with this stuff? Because most of the time when I read interviews like with Stephen King or whatever, he seems like a regular guy. And some of the shit that I've read in his books.
So what you're saying is how does the author get to that place?
Right. What are the different? I mean, it has to be obviously. There's a lot of different things involved. Sid talked about previously in writing his novels how he's had nightmares that have kind of stuck with him and were ingrained in his brain, for a long time. And I know that that's a way, and obviously, horrific things, God forbidding, can happen to people to drive them to write about certain events. But just like
The Crow, Jim O'Barr. That was all about his. Didn't his wife die while he was overseas?
Yeah.
And he couldn't get back home, and so it was cathartic
Yeah.
You know, it was a way for him to process his feelings about not being able to be there for his wife in the ultimate time of need.
Right.
So this is really a tailor-made question for Sidney Williams, when you say.
That's why I'm asking.
Right?
It.
How does the author get there?
Oh, I think it's a combination, really, of curiosity and logic, because I think I'm naturally curious. I think people who are avid readers are curious, and the what if is there. You know, what if there were cryptic symbols in children's books that could be used to channel real Sumerian terrors? That's the premise of my book Nelfs that we talked about in the last episode.
That's not based on a real story?
Nelfs? No, I made
fiction
it up.
again.
I made
Fiction.
it.
We made it last episode for making up these lies.
I made it all up.
What a liar!
I've been afraid of Nelfs for no reason.
Oh man, I was gonna look under the bed for Nelfs tonight, but.
But it's, you start to ask that question, and then you kind of logically start saying, well, what would happen if this occurred? Or my novel Night Brothers is about a vampire who has been sealed under running water, which is one of the old Dracula aspects. A vampire can't cross running water, and she's
wow, I never knew that was new. That's new for me.
That's why
it's the purity of the water.
That's why he has to be in the cargo hold of the boat that goes to London, right?
Yeah.
You know, because he can't do it himself.
Yeah, which is a great set piece within Dracula.
They did that in The Strain too. Del Toro.
Yeah.
Del Toro with The Strain, which is a show that just struggling to be good at all. But you know, when the master first gets into New York, he has to be driven across the bridge, you know, into the city or whatever.
Yeah, those opening
across the
episodes
water.
are great of that. But my story, was what if this ancient vampire was trapped under this body of water for a period of time, and then what if there were a drought? And what if that body of water dried up? And of course, she was pursued by humans, and they were trying to kill her when she fell into the water, and so she's not going to let that happen again. And so my what if was, what would she do? Well, vampires can control animals. We learn also in Dracula, that he can control the little creatures of the night.
Right.
And so she, I started thinking, well, what would she use? Well, what animals would be in the forest of Louisiana, which is where my story is set, that she could use. And there are legends that there are panthers in Louisiana, and they're in some dispute. But I thought I can have a panther.
Yeah.
Sure.
So her key feature, her key animal is a panther that she uses to cover her tracks. And then there's a drought that has unleashed her, and people think, well, we're having these animal attacks because there's a drought. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, she starts to build a little cadre of people around herself, and all to prevent what happened to her before. And things just, I think, start falling into place for me, again, kind of logically. To step outside my own work, William Peter Blatty is, of course, the author of The Exorcist, which became the film, which is, this incredible piece of horror cinema. And he has really said that he saw himself, as he was writing the novel, as writing a piece of supernatural detective fiction, where the priests came in and were the detectives to try to figure out what was wrong with this little girl.
Yeah, definitely.
While going through a crisis of faith.
Yes,
because
exactly.
That's the big piece that kind of is missing from the film.
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
much bigger piece of the book.
There's not as much
the film.
exposition that
Yeah.
can be
Right.
handled, I guess,
Yeah.
in cinema. But, he didn't set out to write a horror story, but he wanted to realistically depict a case of demonic possession in the Judeo-Christian concept. And in doing that realistically, it wound up being terrifying. Mm-hmm. And, it was, again, a logical progression of ideas.
So what I'm getting from what you're saying is that ultimately the way that a writer can get to that place, this place of nightmares, right, that perhaps one doesn't automatically think of these things unless they're well versed in it, is taking a situation, putting the big what if on it, but then adding in the worst case scenario times 1,000, right?
I think
sort
so.
of thing.
And sticking to a consistency in that universe or that world building, if you will, so that it seems real in that setting. I wrote a novel about demon oppression, essentially called Azarias. And I really set out to make it as real to the Judeo-Christian tradition of what demons and angels could do, to make it realistic.
What is demon oppression?
It's where
You're a stupid demon. Get out of here.
I was thinking they don't get paid. Like they get paid 50 cents.
Have to
demon
use a
will,
different water fountain or
influence without actually inhabiting a person.
Okay.
And so an ancient demon is influencing a girl in my story, and then of course other demonic capabilities.
Sounds cool, man.
Take place, and I used an annotated reference Bible, and there were things that they could do, that the annotators had done. There are verses of the Bible that they would read, and they would find, you read this sentence, and they go, okay, well, from that we can extrapolate that demons can be, or angels can be bound, and and there are all these things, and so it was like a list of things angels and demons can do, and I used that as kind of the roadmap for my story. And I also wanted to, in that, explore the idea that demons were the explanation for all of our legends, and so demons would inhabit an animal, and we would think that it was shape-shifting and that a werewolf had happened. I had a dog,
but
in
really
the story.
it's a demon.
A demon inhabiting the
Okay.
vessel. The Bible speaks of the demons being cast into some pigs, and then the pigs are so terrified by having demons in them that they run over a cliff or whatever. And so that was kind of part of my notion of it, was that everything could be explained because it was demons. And of course, then we have characters trying to deal with this situation, and I set out to make all hell break loose, literally, by the end of it. And the demons are unleashed inside an insane asylum, and characters are trapped in that setting. And
That sounds like a great read, man.
Yeah, man. Wow.
I hope
If
it
I
is.
could jump in a second, I think something that you touched upon that I think is one of the real reasons why people like horror, love horror, is that it provides answers. There's so often in the world random stuff just happens, and you have no idea why, but you can attribute it, and it's something that's conquerable. You figure out the rules, then you can stop it. And this is actually where play theory comes in, because it is a game. They're game players, but they're really shitty game players because they don't tell you the rules.
Right.
And it's only, if they're playing with you too much, that gives you the time to learn. And so, for me, I have depression. I take medication for it. I'm fine with that. Depression's not something I can ram a stake through,
Right. Yeah.
But I can stake me a vampire.
Right.
About his business.
Yeah, and that's part of horror too, is examining the human condition and the mind, right?
Well, and
Psychology.
Yeah, and I mean, all of our monsters, going back to even deeper, meaning of our monsters, vampires are an exploration of the fear of death, and an exploration of the, the notion of mortality and immortality, and the question, does something last after us?
Does something want to last?
Yeah,
after
yeah.
us,
Do you want to live eternally in this form with this need to feed?
Because I mean, it's a
whatever?
prison. I've always pictured vampires as being prisoners. They more than likely unwillingly made the decision, I'm going to be a vampire.
Let the right one in.
Deals with that,
It's such a good movie.
It's a great movie, and it's a great book too.
I have it on my e-reader.
When I saw the original, not the remake's fine, but the original,
It's the European.
yeah,
film.
it's like Scandinavian.
Yeah, I believe the
whatever.
original is Let the Right One In.
Yeah, and it's Let Me In.
It's
Right.
the American
And
version.
so here we have a vampire who is like 1,000 years old, trapped in the body of a 13-year-old boy who's also been castrated. Okay, was castrated in a ritual that led to him becoming a vampire. So he is asexual, right? And there's always the sexuality component of being a vampire.
Sure.
But also truly trapped, like you said, imprisoned in the body of a boy. You know, never to ever. So, you know, when you're 1,000 years old and your body is an undeveloped body, you know, that's some pretty interesting space to explore. And in the book and in the film, basically a boy who's being bullied and tormented by his peers at school befriends this vampire who's moved into his apartment complex. He does not know, okay, what's up. And he just thinks it's the little boy and her really weird dad who live next door.
Right.
And something that's really explored very heavily in the book is that it's also like a coming of age thing. He's getting tingly feelings. He thinks it's a girl, okay?
Yeah.
And the vampire presents itself as a feminine form. Okay? And so he thinks he's in love with a girl, or falling in love with a girl, but he's not. Not only is he falling in love with a castrated boy, but it's also a vampire.
Right.
And that's really weird. A weird dynamic to be in the middle of it. And then he, you know, the vampire starts telling him, hey, you know, I'm not who you think I am. And boy, that means a lot. You know?
Yeah.
There's like a lot of like things to check off on the what I'm not, what I really am sort of thing. The book is really quite good.
Is that why they in the American film they cast a girl as the vampire?
They simplify it.
Yeah,
Yes.
they did simplify it.
But you know, it riffs off of so many things that have come before because it's a Renfield story.
Yeah.
And the Renfield is particularly awful.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then also,
He's
you know,
a
it kinda-
pedophile.
and it kind of riffs off of also Claudia from Interview with the Vampire. The young girl that's trapped in a child's body, but I mean, or she is converted made into a vampire as a child, but is then an adult trapped in a child's body.
So it's October, it's Halloween. You mentioned the book that you read, that you read every October. Sydney, are there any movies that you revisit?
Well,
around
you know,
the Halloween
a
season?
fairly new film that was sort of crafted last year to be in that vein is a revisitable film each Halloween is a film called The Houses October Built. And it's actually directed by one of the actors in it, a guy named Bobby Rowe.
Is this on Netflix?
Yeah, I believe it is still streaming on Netflix.
It's called The
Houses October Built.
Okay.
And it is found footage. I know that's not your favorite thing.
It's not my favorite thing, but when it's done well, I can appreciate
And
it.
I think it is done well here. And one of the producers on it is a guy named Steven Snyder, who was a producer. He was the producer that found Paranormal Activity. I mean, it was produced independently. But
when was this film made?
Last year, I believe.
So what's the premise?
There are a group of people, and they are traveling in a motorhome, and they're documentary filmmakers, and they are visiting these various roadside haunted house.
They're doing a little tour.
Doing a little tour
haunted places.
of southern Texas, Louisiana.
I don't like the look of this already.
Haunted house.
Oh, boy.
Haunted house tales.
Clown.
Yeah. And they're on the road. They're doing documentaries. They're interviewing they're interviewing different actors that participate in these, and they note that there's not any regulatory body for all of these roadside haunted houses. These started out as things that like the JCs would do, and now they're industry.
Okay.
And the premise of the story, of course, is they get a little weirder.
Oh, so when you say haunted houses, you mean these entertainment haunted houses?
Yeah, roadside
Okay.
haunted houses.
Okay.
And they're
All right.
interviewing literally, not to offend anybody, but the redneck players
I'm
in these
so offended.
that are so they're so into their characters and everything. But then they get word that there is like this ultimate haunted house, and you have to get like the secret password to find it. And, they go deep into.
I might watch this tonight.
They go
buddy.
deep into the French Quarter to pick up the password and everything, and then of course it's about getting there. But a lot of the stops along the way are really creepy because they start discovering the participants in these are getting creepier and creepier.
Okay.
And there are people in strange masks and everything. It's been said that masks, of course, are that kind of uncanny valley where we don't know what the the motivation is for a character wearing a mask, and there are all these weird mask figures.
Right.
And it started out. The plan was to do a real documentary, and then it grew into a fictional story. And I think it's Steven Snyder, who I was talking about, the producer, was a scholar. He was a Josh kind of level drill down guy, that was a scholar of horror, and so he brings that knowledge to being a producer of things like Paranormal Activity, Insidious, and then this
He's had great success.
I think his thumbprints are on some great properties, and so it is, especially if we're talking October properties. It's a great Halloween season.
You have sold it for me because, one, I love going to spooky houses and doing all that. And, when something is found footage, that doesn't mean that I definitely won't watch it. I just have very high standards for if you choose to film in that style. And most don't meet my standards. That's me. That's how I like my pizza.
And it's I think everything is a matter of
totally okay with it.
Taste.
I'm a little bit more challenging an audience when it comes to that. My to watch is definitely Dale and Tucker.
Tucker and Dale.
Tucker and Dale
versus Evil.
A great flip on the Cabin in the Woods.
The most you will ever
subgenre.
laugh at somebody falling into a wood chipper.
Oh my God!
I know.
It's so great. Also, I'm an Alan Tudyk fan, not just because he's my celebrity lookalike, and he will definitely be playing me in the movie of my life. But I've also heard too that there's more to come. That they are.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Are doing either like a very short episodic deal or a sequel because it has been available on Netflix forever. I don't think they've ever lost the license to stream
Probably
it.
not. It must be well viewed.
It is well viewed and
great laugh fest.
yes, there's a lot of people out there like me and you who are great proponents of this film. It just has so many great, wonderful little moments to it. So, and you could double that up with any other Cabin in the Woods horror, whether it's Evil Dead or Cabin in the Woods, which I thought Joss did a really great job.
Yeah, I like that movie.
That's a great film. Also.
That just like pays homage to so many of the great monsters and the tropes. Really plays with it well. Matt, we already talked Monster Squad. What's something else that is definitely a must watch in October?
Man, I mean, we're talking about this with the houses. What's it called again?
The Houses October Built.
The Houses October Built. And I was looking at some of the screenshots.
Oh, I wish you people could have seen his face when he was looking at these pictures.
Yeah. Like the mask thing, man. That just if it's done well, man, it can be really freaky. What was that movie that came out a couple years back? The Neighbors, was it?
Yeah, I think that's what it was called.
They
the Strangers.
The Strangers, the Strangers. That was creepy.
Yeah, that's very creepy.
But all that harkens back onto John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
I think that as far as, if you're going to watch a movie in Halloween, that's it. It's called Halloween.
Yeah.
For me, it's the first like super scary movie I ever watched. I've talked about it on the show before. Actually, in our next episode, we're going to be getting further into John Carpenter and our love for John Carpenter as we close out October. But yeah, I think definitively the character of Michael Myers. It's just we were talking earlier about the rules, and how there's things that you have to figure out, and most of the time that is a must in horror films. But the rules that pertain in Halloween aren't necessarily the facts that we have laid out. It's the rules of the story and how it's played out.
Yeah.
You have Laurie Strode, who's unbeknownst to the killer, who is coming after her, and then they finally cross paths and the chase ensues. But we don't know the backstory of why it's going on. And initially, the original Halloween freaked so many people out because it honestly is something that could actually happen.
Yeah.
Even down to getting shot multiple times and then getting up from it and walking away, albeit probably not very far before dropping dead. But still, I mean, the very end of that film is harrowing.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. And I think, too, even though it could happen, I mean, it could be, a stalker-killer situation, we can't dismiss the line in Halloween where the child says, "You can't stop the boogeyman."
Yeah.
And Michael Myers is
The boogeyman.
Boogeyman embodied and personified.
Yeah,
perfectly.
absolutely. So many good lines.
And it's the best use of a Captain Kirk mask, probably.
Oh, for sure.
And
For sure.
We're going to talk about one of the things that I want to talk about in our John Carpenter episode coming in a couple of weeks is Prince of Darkness.
Oh, that's such
which
a good
is
one.
Is that Christopher Reeve?
No.
What was the Carpenter movie that Reeve did? He did one, I know.
Did he?
Did
Are you sure?
To the internet.
Okay.
Did Carpenter direct The Village of the Damned that Reeve was
The
in?
remake?
Maybe
Yes,
that
he did.
was
Yeah,
it.
that would be.
Yeah.
And Reeve, Christopher Reeve
Okay.
is in that.
Yeah.
Prince of Darkness is basically the devil is in a jar in the basement of a church in urban Chicago, in the middle of the inner city, and has been guarded by a secret brotherhood of priests for 2,000 years. And it turns out that Jesus was an alien, and that he can't come here to warn us of this extra-dimensional evil. And it's been locked in this jar for 2,000 years, and the jar is unlocking itself.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And my great little aside to that, too, is I have some dear friends who have been married a long time. Their first date, they'd headed to the theater to see The Princess Bride, but they could not remember the title of the film.
No.
So they went and saw Prince of Darkness instead.
Wow.
I love that anecdote. I just,
Wow.
Could not go further
you could not
different.
You could not go
No.
in the wrong direction any further than that. But
In the Mouth of Madness, too, speaking
oh,
of
no, that's Wes
Possibly.
Craven. Yeah.
No,
that's Carpenter.
It's Carpenter.
Is that?
Yeah.
And,
Okay, yeah.
Sam Neill.
probably one of the best appropriation of Lovecraftian tropes.
It makes you question reality.
Yeah,
it
In
does.
a big way.
And
Have
it-
you seen?
Yeah.
Oh,
it
God.
handles it handles the things that can't be described well as
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's so when they're on the road heading into town and it falls away.
Yeah.
And there's the kid on the bicycle who becomes an old man
Yeah.
oh my God.
I know.
Yeah.
This movie makes you just kind of unravel with it. But my goodness, Matt.
Yeah, this is, I think, in talking about what is to come is a good point for us to go ahead and wrap things up here on episode 15. Josh, Sid, thank you so much for joining me, and
pleasure.
Tom,
Absolutely.
as we continue to embark on our wonderful podcasting journey.
October has been a lot of fun.
Yes, it has, and I am all the more smarter for sitting in this room with all these gentlemen at the end of the day. But for all the guys here, I'm Matt D. Simone. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Matty Loves Podcast, and we will see you next time.
Matty Loves Podcast. Matty Loves Podcast.